Well, all right. I'm glad you're having a good morning. I know it's early there. I appreciate it, James. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. My name's Audie Paxson, and I have my colleague, James Savard, on the call as well.
How's it going,
James
everyone?
is good. Morning, James. So James is going to help monitor the questions during this call and also add some color commentary or criticism if he sees that as necessary as we go through this. So let's get started. So I want to provide everybody just a little bit of housekeeping here, and a few webinar tips before we begin. Everyone's on mute. Let me fix so I can see everybody. So everybody's on mute. So if you have questions, please enter them in the chat. You see it here in the screenshots, a little sidebar on the right-hand side. And the chat's public, so everybody will see all the other attendees will see your questions. And there'll be at the time at the end here that we'll be able to address those. And James will be monitoring this during the webinar to try to answer any other questions there as well. So it's a live webinar. Please bear with us because sometimes we run into technical difficulties.
We'll do our best to get to everyone's questions live, but if we don't handle them right on the call, we will reach out following.
Yeah, and invariably, somebody always asks, will this be recorded? It will. Yes, it will, for sure. So, all right, so this is, let's kind of set the stage a little bit, talk about how we got here for a minute, a little backstory, if you will. So phishing, let's talk about, the evolution of this. So phishing 1.0 is like where I like to start, right? And this is all related. All right. So phishing 1.0 was bad. And it was especially when it first came out because we weren't ready for it. Nobody was. We're talking 25 years ago, I guess. But it was basically based on bad content. We're talking about malicious links and weaponized attachments. And soon after, some security controls came out, and like SEG, secure email gateways, and they could scan for those. Pretty straightforward stuff, and they effectively worked for it. And then about 10 years later, I guess, phishing 2.0 came out, and that shifted from bad content to bad intent, meaning there's no links or attachments in there. The examples that come to mind are fake invoices or wire fraud or the infamous gift card scam, which is, one that everybody mentions as a common example because most people have seen it. We all know what it is now. But those had call to actions in the email. They were asking people to do something. They were social engineered. So again, nothing there to scan and inspect. So that required some behavioral AI to be able to catch what traditional tools missed. So now what we're seeing in the threat landscape is phishing 3.0 emerge. We talk about AI-generated attacks, deepfakes, multi-channel BEC campaigns that blend email with Teams calls and SMS and voicemail. And this social engineering just got, exponentially more sophisticated with all the AI tools that are coming out now. And that's why this research matters. We're right in the middle of this transition right now. So most organizations are still defending against the 2.0 while the 3.0 attacks are already landing. And that gap between the defenses that we've built and the attacks we're facing, that's what the data that we're going to talk about reveals. So before we jump into the research, let's establish something here. So this is no longer a theoretical thing. It's a real problem. From a senator getting impersonated to a Hong Kong company losing over $40 million through weaponized deepfakes, we're no longer talking about edge cases, as you'll see here in a moment. And if you look at the geographic spread, let's see if my laser pointer working here. There we go. Yeah, if you look at the geographical spread, this data from SubHub analyzed over 2 million deepfake-related fraud attempts across 200 some odd countries. And these aren't like incremental increases. These are like explosions. And this is happening everywhere to everyone. So that's why we did this research. And this is the second edition of this. We just completed our second year of it. And this time we surveyed 500 IT and security professionals. We wanted to understand where organizations are along the spectrum. And so we can get their views on it. And the good thing is because of the second one, we're able to compare and see some trend between last year and this year. So let's go ahead and get into that. So I'm going to go over like 5 different insights on the report. The report has a whole lot more information, but these are the 5 different ones that I wanted to cover. All right, there we go. Can you see that, James? Insight number one?
Sure can.
All right. So last year report, we established that deepfakes were an emerging threat. This year, it's the data paints a different story. Now it says they've clearly arrived. So the incident rates jumped 10% year over year. So 85% of the organizations we surveyed, 85% of them reported getting hit by a deepfake-related attack. So, and here's what really matters. What's important about this is 55% reported a loss. So, and when orgs lose money to deepfakes, they lose big. So let's look at if you look at the distribution right here in the middle, these losses cluster right around $100,000 to $250,000 range. So, and 61% of the organizations that lost money, they reported losing, exceeding six figures. So that means nearly 1 in 5 lost over $500,000 or more. So when we factor all that in, now we're talking about a pretty high average, and it's this, right around $280,000 on average per incident. So now let me put that $280,000 into perspective. So according to our research, 85% of the orgs experienced a deepfake-related attack in the past year. That's 10% year over year. 55% of them reported financial losses with an average of $280,000 per incident. Now, if everybody's very familiar with business email compromise, BEC attacks, and we've been dealing with those for years, and those cost organizations on average $50,000, and that's from Verizon. They've been pretty consistent about that number for the last 2 or 3 years, but also data from FBI is pretty similar to that. And I'm sure that number's actually higher, with the unreported losses factored in. So, because a lot of businesses don't want to report these type of losses for various different reasons. And I suspect the same is true and going to be true, probably even more so with related attacks. But
could you go back to the previous slide there, Audion?
Yeah.
Like, it's a wild bell curve, right? Like 30% clustering around that 100,000 to 250K, which might add is a wild berth.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at the edge cases here. You might be sitting here thinking like, maybe I'll pay $1,000 to $10,000. Maybe I'll get lucky. Right. Or you might be looking at the opposite end of this, saying, 5% of these cases ended up in $1 million or more in damage. And that's just the nature of things. I mean, in cybersecurity, the reality is people underreport.
Yeah.
These attacks simply are not going to be recorded as much, whether that's from, I don't want to open up the wide range of criticism that that my organization would be hit with, whether it be by stakeholders or shareholders. I just think that these kind of attacks are like, it's an underestimate in the way that we see it. But the damage here, it's really not, you can't argue with it.
Yeah, for sure. And part of that's the nature of the attacks, at least as they are today. It's easy to scale phishing attacks and BEC attacks, because you can just it's not really spray and pray anymore because they are highly targeted, at least by industry and stuff. But deepfake related attacks they're hyper targeted. That means that they definitely want to go after a victim that they know has a lot of money, and if they're going to put that kind of effort into it, they're going to try to extract as much as possible instead of just playing the volume game. So that's kind of also what's really scary about it. They're going to take that effort. That means they're going to try to really make sure the quality of the attack is, very high. It's typically going to be a multi-step, a coordinated type of attack, and the damage will be serious. So, and the other thing is it doesn't, when I talk to some businesses about this, of course they're worried about the money, but right now there's kind of this inherent trust in the space, especially if you're talking about, in Teams meetings or Zoom calls, things like that. People feel like that's where work gets done. And they kind of typically today, just like we did 25 years ago before we started to see our first email spoof, figured this is safe. And so it kind of breaks that illusion there that this is a safe place for us to talk and do stuff. And now we have to have our guard up in the very place that we spend every day working with colleagues. It's a sad reality for sure. But I like to kind of put this in perspective to BEC attacks, because we know businesses take BEC attacks very seriously, and they're constantly trying to do something to stop them, because that's the business we're in. We talk to them, talk to customers every day. And to see some deep fake attacks, which are still just emerging, and see the type of damage that they can cause is pretty serious stuff. Okay, on to insight number 2. We asked respondents in the next 12 to 18 months, how does deepfake defense rank among your organization's security priorities? Last year, 43% said deepfake defense would be a top priority. This year, it's 71%. That's a 28-point jump in 12 months. So nearly everyone agrees that this matters. And my hot take that I'm going to share, hot take number 5, is going to tie this together and provide kind of an interesting perspective on these insights. So with some complicated math, that means 37% backing up here. The 63% on the right-hand side, 63% of the organizations still haven't invested a single dollar into this. So what we have 71% saying this is a priority, and well over half still haven't invested any money in that. So that's a pretty serious gap, right, between concern and action. And this is typical market dynamics that we've seen in the past. But we saw a similar gap last year as well. And I'm surprised that hasn't closed a little bit. And I have some hypotheses on that I'll share towards the end. If I forget to mention it, go ahead and ask me, James. So
Will do.
All right. So number 3, we asked respondents, which types of deepfake attacks has your organization encountered in the past year? Because there's a variety of different types. We're not talking only just a video in a call. Deepfake in the larger scheme of things has to do with manipulated audio, video, images, personas in general. So let's go through some of the numbers that we saw. So what we saw for sure is that basically email and static images remain tied, right? They're the most common attack vectors at 59% each. Now, what we also saw there is recorded audio. That jumped from 25 to 52%. That's a pretty impressive jump. Then recorded videos jumped from 33 to 45%. And then live video attacks, those also jumped up about the same amount, about 30 to 41 points. So to me, James, the sophistication gap is closing, right? So what used to require really specialized tools even a year ago and some technical expertise, that barrier to entry is coming down, and it's just much more accessible to a much broader range of threat actors it doesn't require nearly as many technical skills to be able to pull these off. So now organizations that only defend against like email-based deepfakes are going to be blindsided just by a simple phone call with a spoof voice.
All of these numbers, I mean, this is 30%, 20%, all of these increases across the board. I mean, this just goes to show you this is a rising attack trend, and this is something that we are going to be seeing more and more of. 52%, more than doubling in just 1 year's time. I mean, that's incredible. The fact that live videos now represent almost half of the amount of attacks that are taking place for deepfakes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cause for concern, to say the least.
Yeah. So, and let's talk about how widespread the training is, right? So we asked all the organizations, how often does your organization provide training? Here's some good news. 88% of the organizations now provide some sort of deepfake related training. That's up 20 points. Last year was 68%. So organizations are clearly taking this seriously, and they're investing in awareness training, which is a good thing. The bad news, it's not working. Right. So the average first try pass rate on deepfake simulations sits at 44%. So less than 1 in 10 organizations saw pass rates at 80% or higher. So basically, large majority of them are failing. So despite this widespread training adoption, 94% of the respondents said that they were concerned about deepfake threats and that their employees are falling for these attacks and these simulations at alarming rates on a continuous basis. For sure, training is critical, and we need to keep it up, and we need to improve the quality of it. But by itself, it's not going to solve the problem. you need to, augment that with technology that can also catch what the humans miss, because humans are clearly missing a lot. Now, from my take here, my audience hot take is there's a preparedness paradox at play here. So, and to me, James, this is like the meta threat, the way I look at it. And to me, it's one of the most dangerous findings in this report whenever I kind of correlate some of this stuff. So what the respondents believe, an overwhelming majority of them, 99% of them, feel confident that they're in their deepfake defenses. 73% said they were very confident. That's up like 40% from last year, 40%. So everybody's highly confident in this, right? So it almost doubled. But if we look at what actually happens, because the same people reported later on in the survey that they have a high rate of incidents. So the incidents actually increased. So financial losses increased. Training is, the effectiveness of training is going down. And most organizations, remember, 63% haven't invested in defenses. So yeah, to me, this is the preparedness paradox. Organizations believe that they're ready for something that they've barely started defending against. So they're confusing awareness with preparedness. Now, I think I know why, at least a little bit. I've read the headlines, and they've done some training. They've added to a priority list, and to them that feels like progress. But again, that's all about awareness. They're not actually stopping it. And to me, that doesn't show up anywhere in my MITRE handbook, right? So this confidence gap, that's a disconnect between the perceived readiness and the actual capability. And I think some of them, they are evaluating tools. Maybe some of them are trying to build their own tools, and they view that these emerging tools for this emerging threat are still new. So they're kind of in a wait and see mode. But if they don't start investing in some of these tools right now, because it doesn't mean that the tools they buy today aren't the ones they're going to be using a year or 2 years from now, then there's a lot of catch up they're going to have to do, because it's a process to go learn about the tools, understand how they work, find out what works for them. So the fact that most of them are saying, we're talking about it, we're worried about it, we do some training, but they haven't started investing or even started evaluating some tools, that disconnect is very concerning. So now what, right? So other than, I already said, for sure, companies should be evaluating and sampling and working with some tools to augment their training, keep the training, but there's best practices. And anytime I mention best practices, especially if I do this in a live audience, I almost always see some eyes roll, right? And it's kind of like telling people to eat their vegetables, but they are called best practices for a reason. They are known methods and approaches that produce results and that work. So I'm going to go over a few of them. So MFA for sure, SSO, unique passwords, that's really important. So deepfake can't bypass a second factors. So that makes at least credential theft alone worthless to them. Code words for verification, we use that here. So like this last year, whenever we were going through our new enrollment period for our healthcare here, our head of HR told everybody during one of our calls to look for an email, and there was a survey in there they had to fill out. And she said, it's not going to be a phishing test. You're going to look for this particular code word in the email. So she told us ahead of time, here's the code word so you know it's real. You can use that in all sorts of use cases. That's very low tech, doesn't require you to do any POCs or anything else like that. It's easy to roll out. All of these are low tech. Some of these seem very simple, verifying through a separate channel. So if you get a Teams call requesting a wire transfer or changing a routing number or onboarding a new employee, just call back on through a different channel. And number 4 is probably one of my favorite ones, segregation of duties. This one goes back a long ways before any sort of tech. This is like the basic accounting. For instance, in accounting, the way the best practice works is one person might have access to a checkbook and they can write checks, but they're not authorized to sign a check. A different person is authorized to sign a check, but they don't have access to the checkbook. And a third person gets the statements every month, and they can look at the checks and who signed them and the amounts. So any sort of segregation duties, and that works in high tech as well. So somebody else could put in a change request for a new employee, for instance, but they can't hit the go button. Somebody else has to do that. So you can apply that to code, accounting, HR. That right there can help a lot. And then, of course, continue to do the employee awareness and training. We do security awareness and training in our system for phishing and BEC attacks and a whole bunch of different ones. And across 17,000 customers, we have a good data set, so we know what works. We see that the customers that do phishing simulation testing every month, that their click rates go down by 3, and the quality of their report phishing rates improve threefold as well. So it really does make an impact if you are consistent with your employee awareness and training. So now I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing about it. This is not going to be, I'm not going to go on and on. I have one slide here to talk about what we do for deepfake protection. So we just actually not launched this year deepfake protection for Microsoft Teams. So, and what that does, it helps protect any employee in a meeting from being a victim from somebody who crashes that party and is using fake voice and video to look like they are somebody that they know and trust, typically an executive or somebody who can give orders to people to go make changes and do stuff. So we automatically scans all the guests that join the meetings, and we look for similarities to monitor profiles that we know that people might spoof. And then we're going to show an in-meeting warning to all the employees and to the IT people to let them know that this is going on. They should double check it and then kick them out or end the meeting. It's really straightforward, really simple. This is one example of adding technology on top of your simulation and testing as part of a better breakfast to be able to help protect your organization from deepfake-related attacks. So that's it. James, do we have any questions so far?
We have. Paul Jones asked a great question here based upon, generally blast radius. How much a deepfake-related attack is going to affect an organization with, say, 100 employees compared to 5,000 employees? And yeah, as is the case with just about any kind of attack, the scope, the recovery process, and the remediation for a deepfake-related attack, it just generally in regards to the scope and nature of how invasive this sort of attack is, it's going to be a lot more costly to remediate these things due to the level of compromise related with a deepfake related attack. And yes, everything is comparative and relative to an organization based on size. Something costing $10,000 to an organization of 100 employees is just as damaging as something costing $500,000 to an organization with 1,000. It's all relative at the end of the day, and it's more a matter of how much access these threat actors have when they get into your organization and perform and conduct an attack like this.
Right. I think that covers it for sure. There's other, especially I would say for organizations that experience their first one, there's some secondary, trauma that happens from this. What I mean by that is there's a little bit of shock, right? Oh my gosh, what's happened? And if you feel like somebody, broke into your house and went into your room and you saw that they took stuff out of the jewelry box, you now start to think, well, what about this? What about that? So there's an associated cost where we need to go back and look at some previous meetings. Did this person join that? Have we had other people join from the same domain or similar subject request? Let's go look at any other accounting changes. Let's go look at any IT changes. So it's one of those things where you just feel a little bit, paranoid, and you need to go back and say, how long is this the first time, or has it been happening for a long time? What's the damage? And then that usually will, be the start of some new policies and new procedures and new checklists, right? And in terms of incident response and preparedness, and then of course they start looking at trying to be a little more proactive to prevent these. So I would say the blast radius and the cost for the first time is really big, right? Emotionally and process and logistically, because of all those things that naturally happen.
Good questions.
Yep.
Oren, another question here. Do we support all collaboration tools today? Currently, we are supporting Microsoft Teams with the other platforms in the works. We have these on the roadmap. We are determining and prioritizing which one's going to be most beneficial to the customer base as it stands today.
All right. Good question. I like that too.
Keep them coming.
Yeah. I do have a bonus slide.
Let's see it.
All right. So we also asked people about, how often the leadership and board's asking about it. And already what all of them reported, 80% of the boards have requested some sort of deepfake risk briefing in the last 12 months. So we know that 71% of security leaders are prioritizing this, and only 37% of them have, deployed some sort of protection. So there's still that big gap. The point of this is that if you're in that gap between prioritizing and actually investing, you might want to step it up, because if your board hasn't asked you about it, they're going to, based on all the data we're seeing right here. Okay. Well, James, thank you for being such a great co-host. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who attended today. And we look forward to attending our next webinar.
Thanks all.
All right.